What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our Week 3 college football preview and picks. As always, I got Ty joining me here to break down this week's best games. But before we get into it, we got to talk about last week's locks. And I got you slightly going 500 last week, 3-3. That Michigan game obviously didn't work out for me. Oklahoma State with a lucky cover in OT going for two to cover the 7.5. Tulane made it a great game against Kansas State to cover there. Iowa State. Iowa unfortunately did not cover. It was what was it, 37, so just missed out on that one. Colorado, Nebraska. Colorado didn't show up, so that didn't hit. And then Boise State almost actually won in Eugene, only lost by 3, so they covered that 20.
Yeah, rough week for me after starting 5-1. Maryland -9 is pretty embarrassing considering they didn't even win the game. Colorado, Nebraska, like you said, I kind of underestimated the Nebraska defense and the impact they would have. And Mississippi State, I didn't think very highly of Arizona State, so I thought, getting 6 in that game, that was probably my biggest lock. They couldn't pull it out, so gonna have to bounce back this week.
Yeah, and this week I'm going with Arizona, K-State, the over 58. And I feel like Friday night, there's going to be some Friday night fireworks. It seems like there's always a game that explodes before we get into the weekend. And then I got, some better games this weekend. LSU covering against South Carolina, Boston College getting 16 at Missouri. I think that's kind of free money. I don't want to say anything, but that's the bet I'd probably hammer the most if you're taking any, just because Boston College has looked great these first 2 weeks. Missouri obviously as well. Boston College, they got Bill O'Brien as the head coach, and they know how to play some good football out there, out east in Massachusetts. So maybe this Boston College team could turn some heads with that game. Maybe they squeak out a win. Who knows? But Tulane, I'm going with Tulane again at Oklahoma. Ole Miss to cover at Wake Forest, who just lost to Virginia, 22.5. I feel like that's a given. And then that Colorado State, I think last year's fireworks in that game, it's kind of a big rivalry starting to heat up back again. And I think that's going to be an over.
Yeah, so for my 6 this week, we're going with 6 dogs. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but I just had to pull the trigger on Memphis, Florida State. Uh, Not just off to a bad start, I don't think. I think they're just a bad team, and you'll see that this week. Would not be surprised if they lose. And same with Missouri. I think 16 is a lot of points considering Boston College is a pretty good team so far, and I wouldn't be surprised if they pulled a huge upset there. So I got them as well. Pittsburgh, and we'll throw UCF and UCLA. So those three, I think, are all going to win their games outright. So obviously, I'm taking them in the points. And then Oregon State getting 17 at home. Rivalry game. I'm sure they're bitter about Oregon leaving the Pac-12, leaving them to die in the Pac-2. And Oregon has not looked great in their 2 games. 2 close games to start the year at home. Now they go play their rivals on the road, giving 17. So I had to put that one in there.
But then looking at last week's games, yikes. Not much going good for us, at least in the straight up picks. Your only advantage was the Tulane game that came down to the wire. Don't need to talk about the first three. Obviously, those weren't some good games there. At least we did get the end games right, so I guess to give us some hope going into this next week.
Yeah, it was, I mean, that's ugly right there. I didn't realize it was that bad. But Cincinnati obviously threw their game away. SMU, I'm not really sure what's going on with them. And then Iowa also choked their game. So both of us could have been a lot better. There were some blown games in there.
Yeah, and we'll start this week with UNLV Kansas. Kansas coming off of a disappointing loss, and I think they're going to respond pretty well. I'm not saying they're going to cover this 9 because UNLV is a decent team out there in the Mountain West. But Kansas, if they want to compete in the Big 12, you got to win games like this and possibly have a chance in the playoff, with the new 12-team format.
Yeah, coming off a loss, I agree. This is one I almost threw in my locks, Kansas -9. UNLV is probably one of the top 10 group of 5 teams this year. They're no pushover, but I think Kansas is going to be motivated coming off the loss, and they'll run away with this game late.
And then at 8, if you want to finish with this game or possibly switch at halftime, I think this is going to be the better game. Arizona, K-State, both these teams ranked in the top 20. I'm going with Arizona on the road, and I'm saying that because they just have more dynamic weapons, and I'm talking Fifta and Titoria. I think that's how you say McMillan. Obviously, if those two can, I'd say go for 150 and a touchdown, it's going to be tough stopping them. And that offense is electric, but so is K-State. So I think this is going to be a great game to watch.
Yeah, I could see this game going either way. Both of these teams had high expectations and have been pretty underwhelming in their first two games. I know they're 2-0, but they've kind of squeaked by. So I think I could see this going either way. But Kansas State, I think they're going to win the Big 12 this year. I think it'll be them or Utah coming out with the Big 12, and I think they'll kind of put themselves in the driver's seat this week.
Then moving to Saturday at noon, LSU, South Carolina. LSU, I think, is going to take care of business here. A lot of people are kind of liking South Carolina in this game with the points and possibly even money line as an upset because I think they could be that underdog team in the SEC this year. But I don't see it happening at least this early. LSU has a better team on paper and have already played a better opponent, which obviously they lost that game to USC. And I think they're going to be ready for this tough environment, SEC first game on the road.
Yeah, you said it. This will be a tough environment. South Carolina fans are going to be ready for this one. South Carolina, pretty much predicted by everyone to be bottom of the SEC, and then just really surprisingly dominated Kentucky last week on the road. I think it was 31-6. So this could be a tough game for LSU, but I just don't see them dropping this. They lose this game and we might be hearing talks about Brian Kelly on the hot seat. So I think they pull this one out on the road.
And then at 12:45, you get Boston College and Missouri. Obviously, I'm going with Missouri in the win here, but like I said earlier, I'm going with Boston College in the points. I think this is going to be a great game as well. You get two top 25 teams facing off early in the season, non-conference matchup. It's what you love to see. But Missouri, as long as Brady Cook and Luther Burden are out there, it's going to be tough to stop them. Even though Bill O'Brien's an ex-NFL coach and has good schemes. I don't know how you stop this offense in college because, those two, it seems like they're just a lock for 150 yards, two touchdowns every week.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's just too much star power from Missouri, but I just don't see this being, a blowout. The 16 points just feels like, it makes too much sense to take this one. I think Boston College will cover, but, Missouri, too many weapons. So in the end, they'll pull it out. But I see this being like a 7 to 10 point game.
And then at 3:30, a good 3:30 slate this week, A&M goes on the road to face the Gators in the Swamp. And you talk about a must-win game early in the season for both these programs. So this is it. You start conference play in the SEC, which is obviously a grueling conference, and you guys already have a loss earlier in the season. Notre Dame, Texas A&M, and Florida lost to Miami. So some decent teams, but you don't want to have two losses already early in the season. And in that case, I'm going with the home team here, the Gators. I just think, it is a home game, and we saw a big matchup against Miami. They didn't show up. Well, I think they're going to show up for this one.
Yeah, I do think this is a bigger game for Florida because if anyone has seen their schedule, if they lose this game, they're not making a bowl game. I don't think that's crazy at all to say. So this is a really big game for them, especially with Billy Napier definitely on the hot seat right now, maybe the biggest hot seat candidate at the moment. But unfortunately for them, I think Texas A&M is the better team right now. I know they lost to Notre Dame. That loss doesn't look great right now, but I still think they're going to go into Gainesville and come out with a close win, and it'll be time to hit the panic button for Florida.
Also at 3:30, you got West Virginia and Pitt. And, West Virginia had a awful moment today. One of their linebackers got shot in a home invasion. So obviously prayers up for him and the whole program. But talking about this game, I think Pitt's a better team on paper. West Virginia didn't really show up in what was it, week two, week one? Week one. They didn't show up in week one. And I just feel like they have the hype every year, but they just don't show up for the bigger games. And this is technically a bigger game for them. And I like Pitt here at home.
Yeah, I think Pitt's had this game circled since last year. Week one, they kind of lost this game in a heartbreaker on a crazy pick six. So I think they've been ready for this rematch here, getting it at home now. And this used to be a really heated rivalry back in the day. So I think after that tough loss last year, and with West Virginia kind of laying an egg in week one, like you said, I think Pitt's going to win this game at home.
And I think this is going to be the game that you're going to be watching probably around 6:30 because it's going to be a close one, I think at least. And I'm going with Tulane on the road. I took them last week against K-State on the road. What better way to showcase that you're a legit team that could make the playoff this year? Well, getting a road win. I said that if they can win one of these two, the K-State or Oklahoma, right there is probably your best win out of all the non-power four schools, I guess. And if that's the case, you go on the road, beat Oklahoma. This Tulane team might be ranked next week and possibly won't drop out for the rest of the year.
Yeah, this would be a big one. And another game I almost threw on there because I could see Tulane definitely covering. Remember, Oklahoma, I think it was 16 to 12 last week. They beat Houston. So nothing really impressive at all about that. I do think they squeak out a win here, but they're another team like Florida who's going to really struggle once SEC play hits.
And of course, we got to put this rivalry on here. Oregon State. Yet again, I'm going with Oregon here. And I don't know. It just feels like this isn't the Oregon team that we all thought it would be. And I'm not saying that I know it's only a week 3 and it could be a little of an overreaction, but hey, this earlier in the season, a win is a win. Same thing with Michigan last year. Not too many people were happy about how that team was winning games, but obviously they won the championship last year early on. It wasn't looking that promising, but if Oregon can keep finding ways to win, Dylan Gabriel gets more and more comfortable in that system, I think they're going to be really good down the stretch.
Yeah, I think this is the perfect matchup for Oregon this week. Obviously, they've struggled through two games, but now you get your bitter rival. So there's no other game that can motivate you more than this one. And Oregon State's going to be ready. Like I said in the locks, they definitely are going to take it personally. Oregon leaving the conference, just kind of leaving them hanging out to dry. But I think Oregon just has way too much talent, and they'll still be able to get the road win, but it will be closer than 17.
And then at 3:30, you get a battle for the Apple Cup as well. Washington State, Washington. It feels like a crime that both of these games are being played this earlier in the season because obviously they both left the conference, like you said. So now this is what you get, early rivalries in a big part of the season for both of these teams. These teams aren't really expected to go far, but this is what it is meant for. Who's going to be the first time ever to hand their rival of the first loss this early in the season? I think it's going to be Washington. Just the home field advantage in this one, I think, is going to be the key to their win.
Yeah, Washington is still the more talented team, but same as the Oregon State game. Washington State feels kind of abandoned here. They're stuck in the pack. Now it's the pack six. So they kind of feel like they're hung out to dry like Oregon State. But that being said, I still think there's too much talent for Washington playing at home here. I know they lost a ton of players, but they still were in the national championship. So there's still talent here, and I think they'll get it done.
Also at 3:30, hopefully you got YouTube TV so you can stream all four of your liking at the same time. You get Notre Dame and Purdue, and yeah, I'm going with Notre Dame on the road here. It's not too much of a road game, I guess you could say. It's not that far of travel. One thing that people don't realize is Purdue, I know they haven't played any, huge teams, but Purdue still hasn't allowed a point this year. And Notre Dame struggling to score last week against Northern Illinois. That was my sixth lock this or seventh lock this week would probably be the under in this game because if that's the case. Notre Dame might not score 10 points and still win this game 10-7.
I mean, I think Purdue is probably going to be the most popular pick for bettors this week. Notre Dame obviously pretty embarrassing loss last week. There's no way around that. But I do still think Notre Dame can just run their way to a win. Obviously, Riley Leonard is struggling pretty bad right now. But I actually think Notre Dame covers in this game. As embarrassing as it is for their fans, it's even more embarrassing for their players. So I think they're going to kind of wear that in this game and bounce back.
And then finally moving to the nightcap, UCF TCU, a great game to start out Big 12 play for both of these teams. UCF obviously newer to the conference, TCU been there, done that, and I think this TCU team is going to be better than people think. This isn't the 2022 TCU team. It's definitely not the 2023 TCU team, and I think it's going to fall somewhere right in the middle there. So don't be surprised if this TCU team finishes maybe 8-4, 9-3 at the end of the year, if they can get a big win to start Big 12 play.
Yeah, I think whoever wins this game, it'll propel them to like what you said, a 9-3 type of season. But I just think UCF is the better team. I see them as like a top 4 or 5 Big 12 team this year. I think TCU is kind of more middle of the pack in that conference. So even on the road, I think UCF is going to pull this one out, and that'll really give them a boost to having the season they've been waiting for here for a few years.
Then the last game on the docket, probably the biggest game this week, I guess you could say, making a case for Colorado State. I mentioned it earlier. This rivalry is gaining momentum, and I think this could be another one of those legacy games. Whoever wins this game, obviously, I'm going with the Buffs and Shador and the loaded roster there. But last year, Colorado State gave them a scare at their own field at home. I don't know. Colorado State possibly could win this game, but I think the safe pick's to go with Colorado. But don't be surprised if Colorado State covers this one and maybe even, this game goes to overtime.
Yeah, this will be a good game to watch. Maybe not two really great teams, but as long as Dion is still at Colorado, this is always going to be a heated game after how last year went, the lead up to it and everything. So this will be a very bitter rivalry for the next few years, and it'll be chippy on Saturday. Colorado has the two best players on the field by far, and I think that's going to be the difference. I think Shador and Travis Hunter will get it done.
Yeah, and that's going to be it for our week 3 preview and picks. Come back next week to see how we did on our best bets and our straight up picks. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.